Hey Gilbert residents! This November, your general election ballot will contain the following two items. Proposition 497, a permanent base adjustment to the town's expenditure limit, and Proposition 498, a capital projects accumulation fund exemption. Let's go over what each of these things mean for you and for the town. Firstly, what is a permanent base adjustment? Let's start with the basics. An expenditure limit is a state-imposed limit on the amount of money Arizona cities and towns can spend each year. This limit is calculated based off of a formula adopted by the state legislature in 1980.
Let's change it.
Now, this formula took into account the services and programs that Gilbert had to offer back then, and it does adjust each year to account for inflation and population changes. But it does not adjust for new services, expanded infrastructure, operating costs, or new programs and facilities. Because of this, the state offers the option to voters to change the town or city's expenditure limit. So, what does it mean if you vote to adjust Gilbert's expenditure limit? Well, basically, it would allow the town to spend more of the funds that have been set aside for things like public safety, park services, road maintenance, water treatment plants. It simply raises the cap on the amount of money the town can spend on municipal services and programs. That's what a base adjustment would do. Let's go over a few things that voting for a base adjustment would not do. It would not raise taxes. It would not create new taxes. It would not allow the town of Gilbert to exceed its annual budget. And it would not allow Gilbert to spend more than it receives in revenues. Now, what was that capital projects accumulation fund we were talking about earlier? Well, this is an exemption that would allow some expenditures to not count against the limit. You see, most cash-funded spending for capital improvement projects counts against the state-imposed expenditure limit. But projects that are financed through bonds are excluded from the limit, which means municipalities can bond for capital projects in order to stay under it. FYI, bonds are a type of loan or debt security that can be used to fund certain large projects. Approving the capital projects accumulation fund exemption would allow Gilbert to cash fund capital projects without the risk of exceeding the state-imposed expenditure limit and without incurring interest and repayment costs associated with bonding. Up to this point, we've gone over what it means to vote yes on these propositions. But what does it mean if you vote no? If voters choose to vote no on both of these items, then the current base limit will not be adjusted, and capital project spending would continue to count against the state-imposed expenditure limit. This would still not be a tax increase. The town would need to consider their options to continue funding certain projects without exceeding the current expenditure limit, such as delaying certain critical repairs, replacements, or infrastructure projects. Also, the town would consider the option of using bonds to pay for these projects. Bonds don't count against the expenditure limit, but like we talked about earlier, they incur interest and repayment costs. Gilbert's expenditure limit is one of the lowest in the valley. Even with the two proposed changes, Gilbert would still be second lowest on the list. The town will still be required to maintain a balanced budget, but there will be more local control over town spending. So those are the basics of the permanent base adjustments and expenditure limits and capital project accumulation funds and a bunch of other long words that sound more complicated than they actually are. Remember, these items will be on your general election ballot in November. And even further than that, these items will likely be towards the bottom of your ballot. Local stuff is always at the end. So make sure not to forget about them, do some more research, and stay informed. For more information, go ahead and visit this website or click the link in our description.